Hi there. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Pat Kowitzel. I'm the Buyer and Author Program Coordinator at Magic City Books, and I want to thank everyone that's joining us tonight for being with us and spending a little bit of your Monday night at a virtual book event. We've been doing these virtual events since April, 3, sometimes 4 a week, and so if this is the first time that you're joining us, welcome. We're really excited to have you with us and hope that you will check out our page, magiccitybooks.com, for upcoming virtual author programs. If you've been joining us a lot, then welcome back and thank you. And I think you're in for a real treat tonight. We are celebrating a book tonight by a native Oklahoman, Vanessa Lillie. Her debut novel came out just under a year ago, and we had an event for her at Magic City Books in a very different time last October. In my memory, it was kind of a rainy night, cool, really great fall night, and Vanessa was in town, and had friends from high school that had stopped in, and some loyal Magic City Books customers that were there, and we wound up selling out of every book that we had on hand that night, and her book went up to the #1 spot on the Oklahoma bestsellers list, and we were just so proud of Vanessa for being able to kind of do such a great first event with us, and we were so excited to see that she had a second book that was coming out this fall, and plans were kind of starting to kick around about being able to do another in-person event, and we were really looking forward to that. And then, the world changed. And as is the case with everybody else, for the last few months, we've just been getting very accustomed to Zoom and other kinds of video conferencing that is going on. And so tonight we're doing a virtual event to celebrate Vanessa's second book, For the Best, another thriller, and you're going to hear a lot more about that book a little bit later, and I don't want to kind of take away from our main conversation tonight. One of the really cool things that has developed in this world where we are doing all of our events virtually is that we're able to do our programs with authors from a lot of different places. And so we can put authors in conversation with other authors. We did that last year with a local author for Vanessa, Richard Cox, and Richard's most recent book came out earlier this year, and we did a virtual event with him. That's available on Magic City Books' YouTube page if you'd like to go back and watch that. But tonight we're really thrilled to be joined by Jennifer Hillier, who is actually joining us tonight from just outside of Toronto. And this is an opportunity that we just never would have been able to have for an in-person event. But Jennifer and Vanessa are friends that have known each other for a while and support each other in their writing. Jennifer imagines the worst about people and then writes books about it. And she's the author of 6 psychological thrillers, including Jar of Hearts, which won the 2019 Thriller Award for Best Hardcover Novel and was shortlisted for the Anthony McAvity Awards. Her novels are published in more than a dozen languages, and the film rights to Jar of Hearts have been optioned by a company called Atmosphere Entertainment. She is a member of the Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime, and her newest thriller, Little Secrets, is now available from Minotaur Books. And so Jennifer is going to be joining Vanessa in conversation tonight. And again, Vanessa is a Oklahoma native from Miami. She spent a lot of her childhood investigating local ghost stories at the public library. And after college, she worked in Washington, D.C., and then later moved to Providence, Rhode Island, where she and her family live. She enjoys organizing book events and literary happenings around town. She's an active Bookstagram poster and somebody that you should definitely follow on Instagram, and one of our good friends at Magic City Books. And so please, everyone, give a warm Tulsa virtual welcome to Jennifer Hillier and Vanessa Lillie. Ladies, take it away.
Awesome.
Hello.
Thanks, Pat. That was great.
Thank you, Pat, for introducing us. So how are you?
Good.
We normally do this.
I know. Normally, Jenny and I would have been able to at least hang out almost twice by now.
Yeah, at least. Right?
Yeah, because we'd be about to go to BoucherCon. Because we go to Thriller Fest and then we have BoucherCon. So maybe even Left Coast. Anyway,
do you remember how we met?
I know. Yes.
Do you remember how we met? You do?
At Thriller Fest.
At Thriller Fest.
With Kelly Garrett.
I'm pretty sure we
were
at the
bar.
I think it was the book room. I think I was in there and you were in there and I was signing, like I was supposed to sign books, right? But like people don't come for the signings in the book room anymore at these
Mhm.
conferences, because people buy the books before they come, or they buy them in ebook, and so there's nothing to sign. So I was kind of sitting around, and then you introduced yourself. I'm pretty sure that's how we met.
That sounds like me. That
And
sounds
then at the
right.
time, it was like your debut novel was coming out, but it felt like forever away. You're like, oh, it's out in 2019, and I'm like, oh my god, that's like 2 years from now, because it was like it
Yeah.
was like forever away, right, or something
Yes,
like that.
it was. Yeah, I went kind of for my early one to like
Yeah,
check everything out and like have like stars in my eyes. It was my first. I mean, when you go to these conferences, I mean, I am a reader before a writer,
yeah.
and there's R.L.
Was that
Stein.
your first Thriller Fest?
That was my first one, yeah. And these like Lee Child from the Jack Reacher books walking around.
I know,
mean,
it's so weird.
it's just all these, and they're all just sort of normal and hanging out.
It's so weird. They don't know how we feel when we see them. It's you're trying not to, I have a Lee Child story where it was Thriller Fest. The elevator doors opened. Like, it was very cinematic. They just opened, right? And there's this tall, shadowy figure backlit by the elevator, and he steps out, and I run smack into his like sternum because he's so tall.
Yes.
And I squeaked at him. I said, "You're a child," as if he didn't know his own name. So, and then he said, "I am." And then I just stared at him, and then we kind of like smiled, and I'm like, and then I walked away because I'm an idiot.
That's the only way to do it.
I know, but that's how we know each other. And so it's like, now that everything has gone virtual, this is a very different launch for you. And how are you finding writing during a pandemic?
I mean, I wrote a quarantine book, actually set in northeastern Oklahoma. I mean, it's not set in quarantine. It's actually set in 2008, but I wrote it during this time because you kind of have to. And I have already threatened on Instagram that I'm going to ask you what you've been working on, because I'm dying to know. But yeah, I wrote one, and it was great to set it in northeastern Oklahoma.
Okay, so did you start this book like after quarantine and then finish it?
I had the idea before, and I'd been tinkering with a few things in maybe like early March.
Right.
But by the time end of March, we were full blown. And so I just really started writing it.
Right.
Really during quarantine. And it was nice because it's set in 2008, and it's to like go back there kind of felt good because the present was so difficult.
Had you decided to set it in 2000? Oh, okay. So you already knew that from before. Okay.
Yeah, I already knew I wanted to do that. There was a couple things that happened then in that part of the state that I wanted to kind of make a part of the story.
Yeah.
But it just worked out because it's hard to kind of be present and writing when the world just feels so difficult. And also weird things, like there was no iPhone yet. So I was like trying to remember. Yeah, like we had flip phones and just like fun stuff like that can really take your mind off things. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I was reading an earlier novel of mine, and they were all using Blackberries.
Yes. Yep.
And I'm like, oh, I feel like this is dated.
But I think people like it. I'm into reading these, just a few years ago novels, though. It's just
I know. Well, everything changes so fast. If we were trying to keep up with, I mean, I didn't know what Zoom was until February of earlier this year, when I was invited to do a podcast, and they sent me a link to Zoom, and I'm like, what is this Zoom? And I had to figure it out really quick. And then a month later, everybody was Zooming, and now Zoom is like a word. Like is it Zoom? Are we Zooming? And so that's how quickly everything changed. And so kudos to you for actually writing a book during this crazy time. That's the one thing I've been struggling with, is trying to get productive and not distracted. Mm-hmm. So it's been fun.
I was also very distracted, but
yeah. And has your little boy been at home with you the whole time?
Yes. He just went back to kindergarten in the past. Yeah. He started going a couple of days a week about a month ago, which was really nice. And then now he's full time. He's actually sitting right here. So he might make a cameo or interject.
That's the beauty of Zoom, though, is we get to see people in their pajamas if they stand up, which I'm not going to do because I'm in my pajama pants. We get to see them being parents.
That's right.
So tell me, so tell us about the new book. Like, as I told you, I'd finished reading it. I think it's wonderful. Okay, let me gush for just a minute. Okay, so when I read your first book, Little Voices, the thing that struck me right from the beginning was that I had never, as a mom, read a book that captured the mind space of a brand new mother, right? I mean, we read thrillers that where the parents are there, or there's children involved, but never specifically the time frame that you wrote Little Voices in, which was those few months in postpartum when you're just trying to survive it and keep your head above water and keep your child breathing and have some semblance of a life. And are you showering? Are you eating? Are you breastfeeding? What's your schedule? And it's a crazy time, and your brain goes to all kinds of insane places. So my favorite thing about that book was the fact that I had never read a book like that before. I thought it was so original and so inventive. But this book, your second book, For the Best, I feel, writer to writer, you have elevated your game in this book. This book is such a strong novel. It's really well written. It sucks you in right from the get-go. So, and I loved it. And I, if you had struggled with writing the second book, which I did, and I know a lot of writers did, it doesn't show. And all that matters is it doesn't show.
Okay, that's right. Because oh boy, did I.
So let's talk about that. So first of all, tell us what the book is about.
Yes. So For the Best is the story of Jules. It's set in Providence, where I live now. And she's a woman who sort of has it all. She's a nonprofit CEO. She's got the nice New England colonial house, the kid, the husband, but she has a pretty serious drinking problem. And she's managed to keep her life together. And then she wakes up one morning, hungover, not remembering the night before. And the story opens with a police officer on her door with her wallet in an evidence bag, and she's the only suspect in a murder investigation. And from there, her life kind of crumbles, and all of the privileges that she has as a white woman, as someone who benefits from, I mean, so many second chances and third chances, those start to really crumble away. And she has to investigate to try to find the murderer herself. And she actually starts a true crime vlog, which is a video blog, to try to uncover clues the police have missed. She starts getting tips from people online trying to help her. And she goes about trying to solve this crime to find out who the real killer is.
It's so suspenseful, and it's so like, you know, I don't get a lot of sleep as it is. So, but then when I read, right, and I don't know if you found this, then I'm like immediately sleepy, right? So it's like, okay, I used to be an avid reader and I could read a book a week, and now I'm exhausted, and then I try to read something, and now but this book kept me going. It was just fantastic. So congratulations on it.
Thank you. It was, the book had two main purposes for me. I wanted to, like with Little Voices, my debut, I wanted to explore motherhood in the darkest ways. That was important for me to unpack all my feelings and put them in a plot that felt big enough for how big motherhood kind of felt for me. This book was me much more exploring my own white female privilege, me exploring things that I have been given, choices I have made, and just questions I had around why women, for example, had like voted for Trump, you know, why women continue to sort of be led by someone, you know, like 60% of women did. And it just, for me, I needed to come around and explore those questions. That was the kind of internal emotional piece for me. The thing I wanted as a goal, like a craft goal from a writing perspective, is I wanted to write like a page turner. That was my goal. I wanted it to be, because my favorite reading experience is always like when you're just burning through the pages. Yeah. And that's, you know, and that's hard to do. I mean, I find it hard to do. And so when I was revising For the Best, because again, it's like the sophomore novel, which is like a tough novel. Yeah. My first draft was, I don't know if you know this, Jenny, it was 120,000 words.
No, I didn't know that. Okay, so let's explain to people
how long that is and terrible.
Why 120,000 words fills
It should
me
be about
Woo!
80, 90.
Yeah,
So
there's
that's
a sweet spot for thrillers, and 120. And I know this because I have finished books at 120, and you just know it's bloated. Like it's bloated, and the pace isn't going to be there, right?
no.
So okay, so you finished it at 120,000, and then you had to go back and start.
Well, I sent it to my saint of an editor because I just didn't know what to do with it. The main character in this book, Jules, her voice was so strong. She just completely drove the action for me. I mean, I was just trying to keep up with her.
Yeah.
She was just a really complicated, pushy character. And so when I got to the end, I honestly felt kind of frazzled. I didn't know what was working and what wasn't. And my editor, who is so kind, read the whole thing and came back to me, was like, look, this is going to work, but you need to cut a lot and take out a whole point of view.
Yeah.
And add the blog chapters. Yeah, those were I had them in there, but not that way. They're like in script format in the book.
Right.
And she gave me all these notes. She's like, listen, I know this is hard, but you can do it. And I was like, okay, she believes me, I can do it. So I think I cut probably 50,000 words at least.
Oh my God.
And rewrote, just like it was a gut job renovation.
Yeah.
The first chapter is about the same, but
so for you, what was the difference in terms of like, so we talk a lot as writers about the sophomore book being just a really super hard book to write. And I have my thoughts on that, but for you, what was the biggest challenge about writing book 2 in comparison to book 1?
I think it really was, you're writing it before your debut has come out.
Yeah.
And then you know that there's an editor and an agent expecting it. And they didn't put any pressure on me. This is all pressure I put on myself, but you just don't want to disappoint anyone because you finally made it to that place that you've been, I mean, at that point when Little Voices was published, I've been trying to be published for 13 years. So, you know, I've been wanting it a long time, and I just didn't want to disappoint anyone. And
it's also expectation, right? It's the expectation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is
and
very different when you're published or about to be published than it is when you are just swinging for the fences, not knowing where it's going to go. Yeah.
And I think it's hard to, like, I wrote my debut fairly quickly. I wrote it for National Novel Writing Month and revised it over a year. I mean, not like overnight, but you know, that's not crazy. But I mean, I wrote For the Best in probably about 5-ish months, so quite a bit faster.
Yeah, that's faster.
And under pressure, and so I think it was just this like combination of, you know, wanting it to be something amazing because, you know, and then there's like the pressure on top of it, and you're also kind of scared. You know, I was writing from kind of a scared place too, but you know, you just get through it, and I knew there was something there. I just needed my editor to tell me how to fix it.
Well, and that's why we have editors, right? Because sometimes it's like, here's what I have, and I can't see through it anymore. And I need you to come in with your very objective, fresh eyes and cut right through into what the story needs to be, and like get rid of all the extra stuff. And I know that for me, I haven't effectively used my editors over the years because I'm traumatized by getting that first book published where it was all rejections. And if you're not published and you're sending your book out to agents and they don't like what they're reading in the first, let's say 10, 15, 20 pages, they're just going to not represent you. Like that's it. They're just going to send you that email back and go, thanks, but no thanks. So it's that idea of everything has to be perfect. But then I think when you get into your second book and your third book, you now have people who want you to get published again. And you have an agent whose job it is to sell your stuff. So they want it to be good. And then you have an editor who wants to put a book out there that people are going to love. And everyone is on your side. And even now, like 6 books in, I still have to remember that there are people on my side that will help me. So I'm glad to hear that you figured that out early, because I'm literally now just going, oh yeah, if I'm stuck and my draft is too long, I can send it to my editor.
I mean, I was very scared when I sent it to my editor. It wasn't oh, there you go, I hope you figure it out. I was like chewing on my nails for the weeks until I kind of heard back. It wasn't painless process.
Nothing about it makes you feel, and I think if you ever get to the point where you're like really confident, then maybe that's the time to hang it up. Because
we just got it all figured out.
You know what I mean? Like, because that's never going to happen. And I think that's part of the angst and joy of being a writer. So you're writing this book, it's 120,000 words. You end up having your editor help you chop it. And then, and now here it is. And it's just, I mean, so when I was reading Juliet's character, as you said, she's super strong, right? And she's the CEO of the Poe Foundation, which is a foundation that her father used to be in charge of. And everything that you said just sounded so authentic. Like, is this a job that you used to do at some point?
I've worked at foundations, and I've known some CEOs for sure. And it's typically is a very type A personality, but I've always sort of equated it with the CEO of like a nonprofit or a foundation is the same as a CEO of a business, except for the nonprofit of the foundation has the like good works that they can wear around. So, it was something I was, familiar with and enjoyed writing about. It's a whole other culture.
There's a question actually from Mary Beth, who wants to know, was Jules and her family's foundation loosely based on the actual Rhode Island infamous or famous family? Her dad reminds me in many ways of a former colorful Providence mayor turned radio show host.
So yeah, that's Buddy Cianci, which I think any, blusterous, interesting, shady character will remind people of him, because that's who he is. He was quite a character. And so I think a little bit, Buddy was here. When we moved to Providence, we've been here 9 years, he was running again for mayor. He's since passed away. But he was still larger than life when we moved here. And certainly has a huge place in this community, even though, he went to jail and there's, he had to break a few eggs. But my husband's actually listening to the Crime Town podcast right now, and the first season is Providence, and Buddy has a big role in that. And he's a really interesting guy. But yeah, so I definitely wanted to like take some figures like loosely based on them. I mean, I think Buddy Cianci is a much more notable, powerful person than, Jules's dad. But right. I wanted that sort of blusterous, kind of knows everything, kind of master of the universe in his own small universe feeling for him. And I'm just so interested in how people build audiences. And so this idea that, he could be sort of this disgraced figure, but he could still build a whole community around him and talk to them regularly and get that feeling of power just from behind a desk. And the same for Jules, that she could start a vlog and find, sympathetic people to help her out. I'm very fascinated by the way in which technology kind of empowers us to pursue our own agendas.
Yeah, no kidding. Especially now, right?
That's all we have now. It's right. This
it levels the playing field in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
So, do you feel like setting is a super important part of your work, right? Because everything that you write about just seems so familiar and, what's the word? Atmospheric, right? So do you feel like you're inspired by where you live?
Absolutely. And when I was, Buddy, my kid's playing right beside me. Sorry. There's a lot of noise. That's better than a meltdown noise. So we're going to do
Exactly.
So I worked on 2 books for 10 years before I wrote my debut. And in those books, I put them in places. Some I had been, some I hadn't. And I think almost setting, I think it was there, but it wasn't. I'd always heard people say setting should be a character. And I don't think I ever really understood that until I moved to Providence and I truly felt like it was a character. Yeah. And I could really dig into the history and just the neighborhoods and the culture and the mini cultures within the neighborhoods. And that's when I think I really started to understand what that means. And so definitely it's all a credit to Rhode Island being a really fascinating place because I love learning about it. I think the people are fantastic and quirky, and some of them are corrupt, and there's just always something going on that's great fodder to write about. So I do feel like moving to Providence and living here and kind of falling in love with the state really helped my writing, because I truly did understand that it is a character.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the same thing happened for me too when I moved to Seattle. It jogs something loose creatively. And I don't know if it's because when you arrive there, you see it, I don't know, like very, in some ways, rose-colored glasses at first, where you're looking for all the good things that you love about it. But there's a way that you can describe the setting that's familiar because you're there every day, but also in a way that resonates to the reader because they're seeing it through your eyes. And I know that living here in Toronto now, I've grown up here. I can't make it sound sexy. Like I've tried. I take everything for granted, and it's hard for me to describe it in a book that makes it matter in any way. But with Seattle, I was only there for 8 years in my whole entire life. So, but the 8 years was enough for me to be able to see it and go, "Ooh, people would find that interesting, and this is interesting, and I can pick these parts out." And so, setting weirdly has always played a huge role in my novels as well, because people are different depending where you go, and their politics are different. Yeah. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about is why do you think it's important for you to talk about white privilege in your book? And also too, you're in the writing community, you're definitely an ally for marginalized writers and writers of color like me. I know that you are just a huge force, and
Thank you.
Where does that come from, I think?
I think part of it is from probably about 20 more minutes. Okay. I think
Expectations. You have to manage those expectations.
he just gave me a really dirty look. So I think, part of it is being in the publishing community at first. I'm just so glad to be at the party and to have my book published. And I was just like so happy to be there, and I still am so happy to be there. But then you kind of like get settled in, and you look around and you start to notice things like there are mostly only white people at the table. And even though I think within like our kind of domestic thriller genre, there have been some really exciting growth in the number of women, because thrillers in particular were a pretty white male dominated space. Right. There have been more women, but largely white women. And you can truly almost count on one hand the number of non-white women publishing in like a big five. I mean, it's for thrillers.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's, so for me, I just kind of observed that and was, disappointed. And also just as something when this book started, for me, it was the exploration of my own kind of privilege. And part of that journey is just realizing ways in which you can step up and be an advocate or an ally. And it's sort of like the least I can do, I'm given lots of these other benefits and things. And it's like, the least I can do is advocate for other writers, support other writers. I mean, that's just not only because many of them are my friends, but just because that's, as a reader, I want more diverse stories. Like, it can be a selfish thing too. It's like, I want more diverse stories. I want different perspectives. That makes us a better community. And, and I think that now is the time that we can really stand up and hopefully demand that more voices are at the table. And, I think there is definitely some progress, but there's also, a long way to go.
Well, thank you for everything that you've done and have been doing. I didn't ever think I would be a volunteer at ITW for anything, but you give a hell of a sales pitch.
Well, you're great at it. So Ginny is on the board now of the International Thriller Writers, which is a really important group that can make some huge strides for just more diversity, more inclusion. And so she's joined the board, and they are lucky to have her, but it may have taken, just a slight bit of arm twisting, not a lot.
A little bit of arm twisting. And honestly, I needed the distraction because the book writing wasn't going well. So the timing the timing actually worked out. And that's kind of funny how things happen, right? Is that maybe a year ago, I would have absolutely said no. I don't think I have the time to be on a board and, handle awards and things like that. But a year later, we're in a pandemic and my productivity creatively is shot. And here's something that and I'm mad about like 1,000 things. And here's a way that I can channel that into something good. But you're one of those really, really good things. And so I'm glad we met. I'm glad that we're friends. I'm glad to know you. I'm glad that you're going to be on this writing journey with me, because writing is a tough business, right? And yes. I've been in it now for not that long, but sometimes I forget how long it's been, and it's been for me 10 years. And a lot has changed. And so a lot of the things that you've mentioned, my first Thriller Fest felt very different than the last one that I saw you at, in terms of there being more women. And I feel like writers are getting younger, or maybe I'm getting older, and that's possible too. But it really did feel like when my first one, everyone was much older, and it was predominantly male and predominantly white. And it's less so that way. And it's important to show up, and it's also important to have allies. So thank you. But I want to get back to talking about fun stuff, because that was heavy. But I wanted to address it as well, because it's a big part of how you and I have connected lately. So, but who is your, I want to meet this author before I die author? Like, who's the person that you would most want to have a conversation with about writing? Who inspires you? Is there any one author?
I've been thinking about this author a lot lately. I don't know why, but Anne Rice had such a formative role.
I agree.
I would like, if I can even be specific, like I want to meet her at like a really gorgeous, decadent dinner. I want her to bring all of her, I imagine, interesting, kooky, fabulous friends, and just like listen to her stories and like absorb the fantastic mind that is her. Any writer, I just have been sort of feeling this appreciation for writers who can just create these worlds and characters that people just get obsessed with.
Yeah.
And she's just such a fascinating person, because she's done so many things. Like she's written, Interview with the Vampire, which is like super famous. She like wrote erotica for a while. Then she wrote Christian.
She did.
For a while. Like she's just, I would love to hear about her career and her passions. And I'm very interested in writers who have been on the path a long time. Like Stephen King, for example. Like I would just love to just listen to what they have to say. I mean, my instinct is it's probably just, you keep going, like it's probably not even a big secret, but I would just love to learn from them in that way.
Well, our job is to make it sound like exciting, right? And our job is to tell people that
we're not just sitting around our pajamas, like worrying about things.
It's not dirty, and we haven't had that much coffee, okay? And it's really a fun, glamorous job, when in reality, it's not.
It's a lot of texting your friends. Oh, I didn't get my writing done today.
And Googling random things and seeing what's on sale on Amazon, and then coming back to it and somehow laying words down. Okay, so I have some questions from Catherine Holum. I love both your books, and I love this conversation about diversifying publishing. As a disabled woman, I'd love to add crime fiction by disabled authors to my to-be-read pile. Can you recommend some authors? That's a fantastic question, and off the top of my head, I'm drawing a blank. Can you think of anyone? No. But what we can do is, if we do think of anything, Catherine, we'll put it in the comments on Facebook, if we're allowed to update it with some recommendations. We can always come back and give you some thoughts on that, because off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. But you're right, that's to be truly inclusive, we would have to include authors from all spectrums and
I think I'm a member of Sisters in Crime. I don't, Jen, are you too? Yeah. Yes, so that's an organization that I believe does have a list, and I think there is a disabled writers list on that. And so, Catherine, I'll make sure and find you, and I'll email you that too, because I'm almost positive that there are. I just don't know them offhand.
Great. And she also asked, have you met Lee Child since the elevator? Does he realize he was run into by a famous? You're so sweet. First of all, I have met Lee a few times since that first time, and I've pretended that first squeak never happened. So, and he's always very polite, and he's really a gentleman. Like, he's one of these people that when you see him in an interview, even though he probably answers the same question 500 times a year, will make it sound fresh and new for the audience. He's just wonderful, and I've learned a lot from him. And I've met Anne Rice briefly. She was one of the guests of honor for Thriller Fest. I don't know when it was. And the one thing that struck me about her was how small she is.
Oh, she does seem larger than life. But
She's teeny tiny in person. And when I saw her, and her son Christopher, who's a writer, is very not small. He's very tall and strapping and very vibrant and full of energy, right? And then to see them walking side by side, because he was interviewing her, and it was a hilarious interview because as her son, he can ask her anything he wants, like, right? And he can get away with things no other interviewer could ever get away with. But she's teeny tiny, and I was delighted to realize that in her books she just seems, I don't know, like you said, like just larger than life, and she creates these worlds that are now part of our pop culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And she just sort of was like a legend in a way that is tough to replicate, at least in my mind. That's so cool.
Well, if anyone has any questions, please post them. And if you don't, that's okay too. Vanessa and I could probably talk all night long because we have so much to catch up on. Are you reading? Well, we both agree that we're not very good at reading these days.
No, I'm not. It's been, I've been trying to do, my goal is to maybe do some more audiobooks and go about it that way, maybe.
Audio is working for me, but it took me the longest time to realize that if you have an Audible account, you can speed up the talking. Did you know that? I didn't know that.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
I did not know that. I'm listening to this one book, and the narration was perfect, but you know how the narration is slower than how I would read in my head. I'm like, oh my God, like it's great and everything, but like and I'm like, oh, there's a fast forward thing where you can speed it up to 1.2 times
or 1.5 if you're really
your brain needs to hear, and I'm like, that's perfect. So audiobooks have been working for me, especially going on long walks. But at nighttime, I'm lucky if I can listen to 1 minute, and then I'm dead. Oh, a question from Sanika.
Sonica. Yeah.
Would you both consider co-writing a book with another author, perhaps each other? Yes, I would right now, Sanika, because I can't write anything.
It's so funny that you say that too, because I'm not going to go into it, but I actually had an idea the other day for something collaborative with maybe, and Ginny was definitely on my list. So we'll.
No, you got to get like a really a really big name if you're going to collaborate. Like that's what I think.
I think what you just need you are a big name, and just people who you want to collaborate with.
People who you want to work with. I know. Yeah. And I asked Liv Constantine, right? Lynn of Liv Constantine. So Liv Constantine they're two sisters who wrote The Last Mrs. Parrish and The Stalker Wife. But they co-write these books, and they take turns. I was asking about their process, and they take turns, and they each do a chapter. And so they are each responsible for half the word count. And I'm like, oh, genius, but at the same time, I don't know how well I play with others. So it might be like, what do you do when you have those creative differences?
Mm-hmm. And then the wife between us, Sarah Pekkanen and Gary Hendricks, they write every single word together. They're on a Zoom or whatever, and they just type.
And they just.
So it's different for everybody. I know.
But they used to be editor and author, right? So they already had that sort of collaborative. I don't know. I mean, I would like to. I don't know. I mean, I would like to, but then I would probably be horrible to work with because I would have opinions and.
I strongly disagree. Well, just let me work a few channels, and you might hear from me soon.
Me on other things. So
It's funny that I really have been thinking about that lately.
Interesting.
Uh-huh.
Maybe a
Yeah.
series with another author.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
You're
This
gonna
is like,
you'll tell me one day. You can
yeah,
see
no,
what
it would be, what's cool about it is we'd only really be responsible for about 20,000 words. Yeah. That's cool.
well, I want to hear about this idea. I really do. Okay, so Catherine has another question. Do you think publishing will permanently change because of the pandemic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it already has. I know that, I mean, not being able to browse in bookstores for a long time definitely hurt print sales for a while. My book came out in April. So, and I actually got lucky with my timing because we locked down here March 14, I believe. That's when kind of everything came to a stop. And all of my friends who had books out around mid-March, end of March, and early April got slammed. Like their sales were just like really affected because no one knew what was happening and no one wanted to spend money on anything that wasn't toilet paper or canned goods. Like everyone was, very nervous. But then by the time my book came out on at the end of April, people were beginning to realize, oh, I think we're going to be in this for a little while, and I'm getting bored, right? And so maybe I'll start buying books again. And so, but I think it has changed. I mean, I think for publishing, there never used to be this many virtual events. A lot of authors were very shy about being like on video because a lot of us are very introverted. And so I think virtual is here to stay. What do you think? I think people are going to continue to do this even when the world opens back up again.
I think there's a question of if there is, so like I think bookstores sell more books when it's in person, and that's important because bookstores have these events and hopefully people buy books. But I do also think I have a column for the Providence Journal that I started during COVID, and it was originally kind of about me as a mother with my kid suddenly at home and my husband suddenly at home. But I've also been, huh?
It's such a good column. It's so
thank you. Oh, thank you. And then it's just, I've done different things, and something I've done several times is talk to bookstores. And it's been fascinating that those who seem, and Magic City Books is another great example of this, who seem to have just been able to kind of pivot. And I don't think things are anywhere near the same for sales and things like that, but for anybody. But to sort of find ways to connect with people through virtual events, through more online shopping, like having it doesn't just have to be brick and mortar. I think that was a huge change for bookstores, and maybe even one that at times was resisted, because of the big boxes and things like that. But I think that there is opportunity now because, some people maybe can't come anymore to stores. They have health concerns, and or just they're busy, and smaller stores have started doing like pickup. So you can just order online and come pick them up.
Yeah.
Or, online ordering, just a more streamlined experience. And hopefully also it's made us all appreciate that if we don't support these businesses, they will go away.
Exactly.
And we have to continue to shop small, support local, or they're not going to be here. And this has, I think, I talked to a lot of businesses that have found that their customers have been really stepping up to support them because they realize that. And I know I did too. There's a lot of things I took for granted. And it's scary to think that your favorite bookstore, your favorite restaurant, your favorite boutique, whatever, could be gone.
Well, you don't want to come out of this having survived, how many months and months and months of lockdown, and then all of the things you loved about the world now that you're back in it are gone. That's the one thing. But I think it's funny as it's now that I'm settling into we're in month 7. My editor just reminded me today we're in month 7 of this pandemic life, and things are beginning to feel like new normal. Like, what do you call it? New normal now, right? Because this is how we live, and masks are like everywhere here, right? They're mandatory. And even my kid going back to school, he's 5, he's in a little mask and all his friends are in little masks. And I can almost manage to forget that we're in a pandemic until I see something that jars me. And so Wednesday, bringing him to school for the first time, seeing all of them line up 6 feet apart, even though they so want to talk to each other, but they're told, hey, you have to space out. And then they're all in their little masks with the little animal prints or superhero characters. It was like, that was my moment again to be reminded that everything has changed. And I think the big question people keep asking me, and you probably get this too, is are you going to set books in the time of COVID?
Yeah.
You know, are you going to write stories that refer to this? But I don't know how we can't, right? At the same time, that's my thing right now is I'm writing this book and I don't want there to be a pandemic, but I'm writing it set in present day. And there is. And so I'm like, do I just go back to 2018 and set it then? Or do I try to envision what the world will look like in 2022 when the book is published?
Yes. And it's like, it could be that we all, let's hope, get a vaccine in the next 6 months and things are relatively normal again, but we have no way of knowing that.
No, I know, exactly. And
there
comes a point. And so how much do you find, like, I mean, you wrote an entire book during quarantine. What do you think that motivated you to be able to do that? Was it a good distraction to write? Like, were you able to just, like, did you use it as kind of like, I can do something else, and instead of thinking about the state of the world and write books?
Yes, it was a big distraction. And I also, the book itself is very loosely based. If anyone watching is actually, this book just came out called Hell in the Heartland by Jax Miller. And it's set in the town right by where I grew up. And this book is not a true crime about these murders that book is based on. But these 2 girls disappeared and were never found and very likely murdered. And I was a senior in high school and they were, I think, 2 years younger than me. And so that case has always stayed with me and something I've been watching for a long time and just feeling incredibly sad for the families and also in awe of their dedication to trying to find these girls' remains and things. So it had been something that I had sort of kept, on my mind and on my emotions for a while. And so it also just like felt good to explore that. And it was set in 2008 is when I wanted to set it. And it also took me to Oklahoma and a different place than I actually live. And it was like an escape. It was exploring things that I'm fascinated by and want to unpack a little bit. And then also to just take me mentally away from being, quarantined with my son, who's driving me crazy, like on a lighter note. And then also just the complete fear and terror of jobs and life and family members getting sick, so it did help me escape. And it wasn't easy at all. Like I took a while to get it done because it was often very hard to be focused. But I really wanted that escape. And it does, and maybe you notice this too, when I'm not writing, I'm kind of cranky. Really, like, if I'm not writing, I mean,
I know it's terrible. And so I haven't written, like I haven't finished a book since March of 2019. That was when I finished Little Secrets. And I'm still working on this next one. And it's awful. Like I'm not a nice person to be around. When mom is writing, mom is happy. And so getting back to before we finish this up, just talking about motherhood and writing. One of the things I struggled with was trying to find the balance of how to be the best mom I can be while also being the best writer I can be. Because I will totally confess that when I found out I was pregnant, it was a huge surprise. And my very first thought was, just after the shock wore off of actually getting the positive pregnancy test, was, what does this mean for writing? Like, how am I going to do this? And as a mom, it took me a while. I had to work all of those demons out with one of my books, the one that I wrote when I first had him, because I felt really guilty for being consumed, because writing is very consuming. It's not like you go to work and it's 9 to 5 and then you shut your day off and you come home. Even when I'm not writing, I'm kind of thinking about the book, right? And you're kind of living in a specific kind of headspace as you're working on it. And I think a lot of creatives feel that way. How did you figure out your balance?
I mean,
Like,
probably not well.
yeah, it's
It's,
just,
I kind of, it, to me, it is almost like a kettle, like letting the steam out of a kettle. And I would try to like attack it in the morning
yeah,
just so that I wasn't frustrated all day.
I know. Yeah.
And, you know, but sometimes I wouldn't get there and sometimes it wouldn't happen. And so I would be at night, you know, and working then and exhausted. But yeah, I think people who are like great morning writers have a lot figured out, because I think that's the best way to start your day.
Yeah, your brain hasn't gotten toxic yet from all of
Yes.
the news,
From
and you
the
haven't
laundry and the worry.
been
Yep.
pulled in 5 different directions. And I'm not a morning person, but I'm realizing if I want to be consistent with my writing, I have to do it in the morning. And that's been working for me. But yeah, that's the thing with momming, right? But what I did learn too, the selfish thing that I learned is that if I'm writing, I'm a better person, which makes me a better mother.
Absolutely.
And so then there has to be time, and it has to be treated like a job. And that took a long time for me too, because it doesn't feel like a job when you're starting. Like when you're starting and you're not published, it doesn't feel like work yet.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like this thing that you're trying to do, but that hasn't happened. But now it's kind of like, okay, at some point I have to treat it like an actual job and carve out time and turn my phone off and be unavailable for a little bit while I do this. But the pandemic has kind of turned that around. Okay, so one last question from Judith Little. Are either of you familiar with Octavia Butler's work? I loved her novels and miss her. I don't know if I've read an Octavia Butler book.
I was just in a sci-fi section the other day and almost bought one. I've been very interested in Octavia Butler and J.K. Nemesis. I wanted to read some of her work too. Yeah. And so on my to-do list is to get a little more into some women sci-fi writers for sure.
I have to get out of the thriller world at some point because I read a huge amount of thrillers because they're my favorite.
Yeah.
And what did I read? I'm not going to name the book, but I read a book that was a very popular contemporary romance novel, and I did it with Darren. So my husband, Darren, who's not a reader, I was trying to okay, let's be a book club for two. It's a pandemic. We have nothing to do.
Oh, that's cute.
And so we bought 2 copies of this book and we read it together. And it was a romance, and I'm not used to reading romance, and I love romance, but I kept waiting for someone to die and nobody did. And I'm like, yeah, this is, I mean, I was disappointed that no one was suddenly murdered. There was no blood and guts. There was no crime scene or forensics. And I'm like, yeah, I've been reading a lot of thrillers and I really need to expand.
Change it up a little bit.
Change it up a little, because not everyone can be murdered in a book all of the time, right?
That's right. Other things can happen to people, not just murder.
Well, this was so much fun, and it's nice to see your face, even though it's like this and not at a conference. But we'll get there.
No, we will get there, and I'm so glad to see you. And we're getting through. It's gonna be good.
Well, congratulations on For the Best. I think it's like I said, you have leveled up.
That's what every book you want better than your last.
No, you really leveled up, and I love when I see that, because I love seeing growth, and I know it's hard to do, and I know that when you're writing it, you don't feel like you're growing sometimes when you're in the thick of it, but I can tell you the finished product.
Yeah, thank you. And Jenny, you know, you're one of my absolute favorite, people, but authors. Your books are so good. If anyone out there hasn't read, I mean, you could start at the beginning, but for sure, her award-winning novel, Jar of Hearts, Little Secrets, is so good. It has one of the scariest openings I've ever read as a mother.
As a mother, I know, it's awful. That's why I exercised all of my fears, right?
I know, it's good. You absolutely do not miss any of Jenny's books. They are absolutely incredible.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to Magic City Books for hosting.
Yes, thanks, Pat. This is so great. And this is wonderful. Thank you all so much. It's great to be back. Have a good night, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
Good night.